The early April sun slanted through the frosted windows of Morrison Law Office, turning the dust in the air into threads of gold. Yet, despite the morning light, the room felt cold, its mahogany shelves lined with thick law books, its silence broken only by the faint ticking of a clock. Caroline Matthews, 56, sat stiffly on a leather chair that smelled faintly of polish and age. Her hands, still clasped around a worn handkerchief, trembled slightly in her lap. She'd spent the entire drive from Stowe to Montpelier rehearsing what she might hear today, convincing herself that everything would be fair, that her late husband Robert had trusted her. After 25 years of marriage, why wouldn't he? Beside her, Amanda, their only daughter, crossed her legs, the soft creak of her tailored skirt breaking the quiet. She was 32, every inch the modern attorney she had once promised she'd become. Sleek black suit, high bun, and an expression that could cut glass. She didn't look at her mother. Not once. Mr. Harold Morrison, the family's longtime attorney, cleared his throat gently as he adjusted his glasses. His voice, when it came, was careful and formal. Mrs. Matthews, Ms. Matthews, thank you for coming. I'll proceed with the reading of Mr. Robert Matthews' last will and testament. Caroline nodded, forcing a faint smile, the kind one wears to hide a shaking heart. Robert's handwriting was on the first page, neat and deliberate. Morrison began to read. To my beloved wife, Caroline, I leave the cabin located on Pine Creek Road, along with all its contents. Caroline blinked. The cabin? That old, forgotten place up in the woods, the one Robert had inherited decades ago but never touched? Her confusion rippled across her face. Surely that was just the beginning. Morrison turned the page. To my daughter, Amanda Matthews, I leave the family residence on Maple Street. All joint savings accounts, investment portfolios, and the total remaining balance of $6 million. For a moment, Caroline thought she had misheard. $6 million. The room seemed to tilt slightly, the edges of her vision narrowing. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I'm sorry, she finally whispered. There must be some mistake. Amanda's lips curved into a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. There's no mistake, Mother, she said softly. Dad knew what he was doing. Caroline turned to the lawyer, her voice trembling. Mr. Morrison, Robert would never. He wouldn't have left me with just that cabin. That place is unlivable. It doesn't even have power. Morrison sighed, folding his hands over the document. Mrs. Matthews, your husband was very clear in his instructions. The will was drafted and notarized 3 months before his passing. It's legally binding and airtight. A flush rose to Caroline's cheeks. She felt the heat crawl up her neck, shame mixing with disbelief. But why? She asked, almost to herself. We built that home together. I supported him through everything. Please don't make a scene, Amanda interrupted quietly, her tone smooth but sharp enough to draw blood. Dad made his choice. Maybe he thought it was time for you to have something simpler. Caroline's heart twisted at the cruelty hidden behind those words. Simpler, as if being stripped of everything she had built was a gift. She wanted to stand, to protest, to demand an explanation, but her legs refused to move. Morrison's voice filled the silence again. That concludes the reading. I'll arrange for the property transfer documents to be sent to both of you. Amanda rose gracefully, adjusting her jacket, already moving toward the door. I'll call the movers tomorrow, she said without looking back. Caroline remained seated, staring at the document on the desk, the ink blurring as tears gathered in her eyes. The world she'd known, the home filled with laughter, the garden Robert had planted for her, the warmth of family dinners, all of it had been handed away in a few cold sentences. When she finally stepped outside, the sun was still shining, but it no longer felt bright. The light seemed harsh, slicing across her face like glass. As the wind from the green mountains whipped through her hair, Caroline realized that nothing, not even the Vermont spring, could soften the chill settling inside her chest. The life she had built was gone, and all that waited for her now was a forgotten cabin in the woods. The house on Maple Street still smelled faintly of cinnamon and lavender, the way it always had when Caroline baked pies on Sundays. The morning light spilled through the kitchen window, brushing against the familiar checkered curtains she had sewn years ago. Yet today that light felt different. Cold, distant. Amanda stood by the counter, her arms crossed, a sleek tablet in her hand. "We need to talk about living arrangements," she said flatly. Caroline froze, her fingers tightening around the dish towel. Living arrangements. Amanda's tone was brisk, professional, like she was addressing a client, not her mother. "You've had a few days to process the will. I think it's time we move forward. I'll give you 1 week to move out." The words landed like a physical blow. "Move out?" Caroline whispered, her voice cracking. "Amanda, this is my home. Your father and I, this house." Amanda didn't even look up from her tablet. "This house belongs to me now. It's in my name. You have the cabin on Pine Creek. It's best you start settling in there." Caroline's heart pounded painfully in her chest. "That place is falling apart. There's no electricity, no running water. You can't expect me to live." "I'm not expecting anything," Amanda interrupted, finally lifting her gaze. "I'm telling you what's happening. I'll hire movers if you want, but you need to be out by next Monday." For a moment, Caroline just stared at her daughter, the girl she had raised, whose scraped knees she had kissed, whose hair she had brushed every morning before school. It was as if she were looking at a stranger wearing Amanda's face. She tried again, softer this time. "Amanda, I know you're upset about your father's death. We both are. But this, throwing me out of my home, can't be what he wanted." Amanda gave a short, humorless laugh. "You think Dad didn't know what he was doing? He made his choices. Maybe he finally saw things for what they were." Caroline's stomach twisted. "What does that mean?" Amanda shrugged, her voice cold and deliberate. "You've never really worked, Mom. You depended on him for everything. Maybe he just wanted to make sure I didn't have to do the same." The words sank in slowly, each one sharper than the last. Dependent, useless, burden. Caroline's throat tightened. "I gave up my job to raise you, Amanda, to take care of your father. Everything I did was for this family." "No one asked you to," Amanda replied, her tone clipped. "You made your own choices." Caroline stared at her, the edges of her vision shimmering. The kitchen around them, the same one where they had once baked cookies together, where Amanda used to dance barefoot on the tiles while Robert played old records, suddenly felt like someone else's home. When she tried to take a breath, it caught in her chest. "At least let me take the china set," she murmured. "It was my mother's." Amanda's lips curved, but there was no kindness in the smile. "That came with the house, Mom. So did the furniture, the decor, and everything else. You'll have plenty of space for new things at the cabin." Caroline's hands began to shake. "That's not fair." "It's not about fair," Amanda said. "It's about what's legal." The silence that followed felt unbearable. The ticking of the wall clock, the faint hum of the refrigerator, every sound pressed against Caroline's ears until she could hardly breathe. When Monday came, the movers arrived right on time. Amanda supervised, arms folded, watching as they loaded boxes into the trunk of Caroline's old silver Honda Civic. Caroline packed quietly, clothes, a few books, framed photographs she managed to slip into her suitcase when Amanda wasn't looking. As she zipped the last bag, Amanda spoke again, her voice low but laced with disdain. "Don't take this personally, Mom. It's just time for you to stand on your own 2 feet for once." Caroline turned to face her, eyes glistening. "You talk like I'm a stranger." Amanda looked away, her jaw tightening. Maybe you always were. The words echoed through the hallway like a door slamming shut. Caroline lifted her suitcases, her arms trembling under their weight, and stepped out onto the porch. The spring wind swept through the maple trees lining the street, carrying the scent of wet earth and loss. She paused for a moment, glancing back at the house, her house, its windows glowing warmly against the pale Vermont sky. Inside, Amanda moved about confidently, already claiming the space. Caroline blinked back tears, started the engine, and drove away slowly. In the rear-view mirror, the home she had built with love and sacrifice grew smaller and smaller, until it was nothing but a blur. By the time she turned onto the open road, her vision was clouded completely, not by the morning sun, but by the quiet, devastating grief of a mother exiled from her own life. The dirt road to Pine Creek wound through thick pines, their shadows stretching long under the fading afternoon sun. Caroline drove slowly, her old Honda bumping over uneven gravel, the silence inside the car broken only by the soft hum of the engine. When the cabin finally came into view, her heart sank. It looked smaller than she remembered, more like an abandoned shed than a home. The paint had peeled away in large flakes. The porch steps sagged dangerously, and one of the shutters dangled loose, swaying in the wind like a broken limb. When she stepped out of the car, the air was damp and heavy with the scent of moss and pine needles. A chill swept through her coat as she stood staring at what was now, officially, her inheritance, Robert's gift. Her fingers traced the doorframe, feeling the rough, splintered wood. "So this is what's left of my life," she murmured quietly. Inside, the cabin was worse. Dust hung thick in the air. The floorboards groaned beneath her steps, and cobwebs stretched across the corners like forgotten memories. There was no electricity. The switch by the door did nothing. The old iron stove in the corner was rusted shut, and when she turned the faucet, only a hollow rattle echoed through the pipes. No running water. She opened a cabinet and found a few empty jars, an old lantern, and a pack of matches that still worked. That night, Caroline lit 3 candles and set them on the kitchen counter. Their soft glow flickered against the cracked walls, turning the shadows into slow-moving shapes. She pulled her coat tighter around her and sat at the small wooden table, listening to the wind press against the windows. Somewhere outside, a branch snapped. The sound echoed in the emptiness, reminding her just how alone she was. The next morning, she found a small well behind the cabin, half covered in vines. It took all her strength to draw up a bucket of water, but when she did, it felt like a small victory. She washed her face in the cold water and whispered, "I can do this." The words sounded strange in the quiet, like she was trying to convince someone she couldn't see. For the first few days, she still had her phone. She tried calling her sister, Linda Bennett, hoping to hear a familiar voice. When Linda finally answered, her tone was hesitant. "Caroline, is it true what Amanda said? That you attacked the lawyer? That you made a scene?" Caroline froze. "What? Of course not." Amanda lied. "Linda, you know me." A long pause filled the line. She sounded so shaken, Caroline. "She said you've been unstable since Robert passed. Maybe you should talk to someone." The words cut deeper than she expected. "Linda, please, don't believe her. I just need some time." "I think we all do," Linda said quietly before hanging up. After that, the calls stopped. Her niece, who used to visit every summer, sent a brief text. Maybe we should give each other some space. Caroline stared at the message for a long time before turning off the phone completely. The silence grew heavier with each passing day. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath. The loneliness pressed down like a physical weight, one she couldn't escape, only endure. At night, she lay on a thin blanket spread across the floor, staring through the hole in the roof where the stars glimmered faintly. She thought about the life she had built, the years spent holding her family together, and how quickly it had all been dismantled. The grief was sharp at first, but as the days turned into weeks, it began to change. It hardened slowly into something else. On the third week, as she patched a crack in the window with duct tape and cardboard, Caroline caught her reflection in the glass, a tired woman with gray streaks in her hair, eyes red from sleepless nights. For a moment, she barely recognized herself. Then, as the candlelight flickered behind her, she saw something new in those eyes. Not weakness, not fear, resolve. She straightened, breathing deeply. "If Amanda thinks I'll break," she whispered into the quiet, "she's wrong." The forest outside rustled softly, as if it had heard her. And for the first time in weeks, Caroline felt something close to warmth, not from the candles, but from within herself. The first warmth of summer had arrived in the Vermont woods, soft and fragrant with pine and damp earth. The days stretched longer now, and the light through the trees reached the porch of the cabin, touching the warped floorboards where Caroline spent her mornings, sweeping away dust and needles. The cabin had begun to feel less like a punishment and more like a quiet test she hadn't yet figured out. That morning, as she moved the broom across the corner near the steps, she felt a strange vibration beneath her foot, hollow, like something loose underneath. She knelt, pressing her hand to the board. It shifted slightly. With a hesitant tug, she pried it up, and a small puff of dirt and sawdust rose into the air. Beneath it, glinting faintly in the sunlight, lay a bronze key, dulled by age and half buried in dust. Caroline turned it over in her palm, her breath catching. It was heavier than she expected, ornate, with a carved handle shaped like a vine. She frowned, glancing around the porch. Nothing here had a lock. She walked inside, checking drawers, cabinets, even the old chest in the corner, but none had a keyhole that matched. For days, she couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time she swept the porch or fetched water from the well, the key seemed to whisper from where she'd left it on the table. It was as though the cabin itself was keeping a secret, waiting for her to ask the right question. One humid afternoon, she remembered something. Robert had once mentioned a root cellar under the cabin back when he was still alive and dreaming of restoring it. She had never seen one. Curiosity stirred. She searched the kitchen, then the small hallway behind it, until her fingers brushed against the edge of a wooden hatch half hidden beneath an old rug. The hinges shrieked when she pulled it open. A gust of cool, stale air rose from below. She hesitated at the top of the narrow stairs, lantern trembling in her hand, before descending slowly. The basement was smaller than she expected. Stone walls, a dirt floor, the faint smell of oil and rust. Shelves lined one wall, cluttered with empty jars, an old hammer, and boxes eaten through by mice. She moved one of the shelves aside to clear space, and that was when she saw it, a small metal door about the size of a suitcase, set flush against the far wall. It was nearly invisible under years of dust and cobwebs, but there it was, a keyhole. Her pulse quickened. She took the bronze key from her pocket, her hands trembling slightly. The key slid in perfectly, with a smoothness that made her heart jump. For a moment, she stood frozen, the weight of memory pressing down on her. Robert's smile, his quiet confidence, the way he used to call her the strong one. Then she turned the key. The lock clicked open with a soft, final sound. Inside, wrapped in yellowed cloth, was a manila envelope and a small metal box. She carried them upstairs, setting them gently on the table beside her lantern. Inside the envelope, she found legal documents, property deeds, mineral rights certificates, stamped with county seals, and geological maps, marked in Robert's handwriting. She stared at the numbers, the notations, 200 acres, all under the land where the cabin stood. The rights were listed in her name. At the bottom of the pile was a letter, folded neatly, Robert's handwriting instantly recognizable. Her breath caught as she opened it. My dearest Caroline, if you're reading this, you've found what I left for you. The treasure meant only for the strong. I gave Amanda what she thought she wanted. I gave you what I knew you could protect. Beneath this cabin lies more than stone and soil. It holds our future, hidden from greed and noise. Forgive me for the pain this has caused. You were always the heart of everything I built, and I trust you to know when to reveal what's yours. Caroline's hands trembled as she read it again, her vision blurring. Robert hadn't betrayed her, he had trusted her. He had built this silence for her to uncover. She opened the small metal box next. Inside were geological reports, names of companies, contact information, evaluations of mineral deposits, quartz, feldspar, and trace amounts of gold. She stared at the figures, unable to breathe. The land was worth millions. Tears slid down her cheeks, mixing sorrow with something fiercer, recognition. All this time, Amanda had gloated over her inheritance, while Robert had quietly placed the real fortune in the one person who would never waste it. Outside, the forest darkened as evening fell. The first crickets began to sing, their chorus echoing faintly through the trees. Caroline sat by the table, candlelight trembling across Robert's handwriting, her hand resting over the letter. The wind whispered against the windows, but this time it didn't sound lonely. It sounded like understanding, like the beginning of something waiting to rise. And as the flame flickered in the growing dark, Caroline finally realized Robert hadn't left her behind. He had left her prepared. The following week, the morning mist hung low over Montpelier as Caroline parked her old Honda near the red brick building of Green Mountain Bank. She had barely slept. Robert's letter still folded neatly in her coat pocket. It felt heavier than paper, like it carried the weight of a secret that could shift everything she thought she'd lost. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of lemon polish and old carpet. A young teller in a navy uniform looked up with a polite smile. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you today?" Caroline cleared her throat, her voice calm but cautious. "I need to access a safety deposit box. Number 247. The teller nodded, typing quickly. "Yes, ma'am. It's registered under the name Robert Matthews and Caroline Matthews. Joint authorization. May I see your ID?" Her hand trembled slightly as she slid her driver's license across the counter. The teller verified it, then led her through a heavy steel door into the quiet vault corridor. The air grew cooler as they walked, sterile, secure. When the small metal box was placed before her, Caroline hesitated for a moment. She could almost feel Robert beside her, the faint scent of his cologne, the way he used to hum when he was deep in thought. With a slow breath, she turned the key. Inside lay a neat stack of folders, bound with a red string. The top one bore a label in Robert's handwriting. "For Caroline, when the time feels right." She unfolded the first document, a geological report dated just 8 months before. His death, detailing updated mineral surveys under the land at Pine Creek. Beneath it were 3 letters from mining companies, each offering to purchase or lease the rights. The lowest offer was $7.3 million, the highest nearly 9. Her hand flew to her mouth. The figures blurred before her eyes. Robert had known. He had known all along. At the bottom of the box was a smaller envelope, sealed with wax. Inside, Robert's familiar handwriting appeared once more. "Caroline, if you're reading this, you've already found what lies beneath the cabin. The land is rich, but wealth means little without wisdom. Wait for the right time. Don't rush to sell. And trust no one who didn't stand beside you when the world turned cold. Yours are." For the first time in months, Caroline smiled, not out of happiness, but out of understanding. Robert had trusted her not just with money, but with purpose. Later that afternoon, she drove across town to meet Mr. Alan Peterson, a mineral rights attorney recommended in one of the reports. His office overlooked the Winooski River, its walls lined with maps of Vermont's underground resources. He was in his 60s, kind-faced, with the quiet assurance of someone who'd seen many fortunes rise and fall. "I reviewed your deeds," he said after scanning the papers. "You, Mrs. Matthews, are the sole owner of the mineral rights beneath that property. They're fully detached from the surface title, meaning your daughter has no claim whatsoever." Caroline blinked, stunned. "Not even through inheritance?" Peterson shook his head firmly. "No, ma'am. Your husband set this up with remarkable foresight. He must have wanted to ensure these rights were protected. What you own could be worth many millions over time, depending on market value." Caroline exhaled slowly, her shoulders easing for the first time in months. The air felt lighter, the room brighter. "So it's really mine," she murmured. "It's yours outright," Peterson confirmed. "And if you handle it wisely, it'll secure you for the rest of your life." On the drive back to Pine Creek, the Vermont sky darkened with summer rain. Drops tapped against the windshield, soft and rhythmic. The forest shimmered under the gray light, each tree slick with water and renewal. When Caroline stepped out of the car, the scent of wet earth wrapped around her. She tilted her face to the drizzle, eyes closed, letting it wash over her like absolution. Inside, she set the folders carefully on the table, beside Robert's letters and the candle she lit each evening. She didn't feel anger anymore, only quiet control. The sense of something solid beneath her feet again. The world that had cast her aside was slowly turning back in her favor, and this time she wasn't frightened. As thunder rolled in the distance, she whispered into the empty cabin, "I'll wait for the right time, Robert." The rain intensified outside, but inside the small wooden walls, there was warmth, the first true peace she had felt since losing everything. The storm no longer sounded threatening. It sounded like a beginning. By late summer, the woods around Pine Creek had turned lush and alive, but Caroline spent more time in town now, quietly rebuilding her life in ways no one could see. Her errands often took her to Burlington, the same city Amanda now called her domain, and in a town that's small, gossip had its own wings. It started one afternoon at Henderson's Market, a small grocery where Caroline still bought canned soup and flour, even though she could now afford far more. She was standing near the produce section when Mrs. Gonzalez, the owner's wife, leaned in close with the kind of smile reserved for secrets too tempting to keep. "Have you heard about your daughter, Mrs. Matthews?" she whispered. Caroline turned, her tone mild. "No, I don't hear much these days." Mrs. Gonzalez chuckled softly. "Oh, she's quite the celebrity now. I saw her last week driving a new Tesla, bright white, right off the lot. And rumor has it she's flying to Italy next month. Something about a wine tour. People say she's been shopping like the world's about to end. Designer clothes, spa trips, charity galas," she sighed, shaking her head. "Such a shame about her father. But I suppose she's trying to fill the void." Caroline smiled faintly, adjusting the basket in her hands. "Yes," she said quietly. "That sounds like Amanda. What Mrs. Gonzalez didn't know, and what Amanda couldn't imagine, was that the quiet woman standing before her now held a fortune 3 times larger than the one Amanda had squandered. Over the following weeks, the whispers grew louder. Caroline overheard conversations in coffee shops, at the post office, and once at the hardware store where she bought nails to repair the cabin roof. Amanda's name carried a mixture of admiration and unease. "She must be burning through money," one man said. "Did you see her place near Church Street? Renovations. Furniture. She's spending like there's no tomorrow." Caroline kept her face neutral, her heart steady. She didn't feel spite, not anymore. Just a quiet sense of balance settling into the world. One gray afternoon, she stepped into Green Mountain Bank, the same place where she'd opened a new account in her name, now containing more zeros than she'd ever imagined. As she waited in line, a familiar voice caught her attention. "Yes." I understand the interest rate, Amanda was saying to a loan officer at the next counter. She wore a tailored beige coat, sunglasses perched on her head, and frustration etched into every movement. It's just temporary. I'll pay it off once the next investment clears. The house needs finishing, and I can't liquidate everything at once. The officer spoke gently but firmly. Miss Matthews, this is your second loan in 6 months. The collateral from your inheritance is already leveraged. I'd advise caution. Amanda's jaw tightened. I know what I'm doing. Caroline turned away before her daughter could see her, heart pounding with a strange, calm ache. It wasn't joy she felt, it was inevitability, like watching a storm roll over a valley, knowing you couldn't stop it, only recognize its rhythm. That same week, Caroline met with Green Valley Minerals, LLC, at a discreet office on Main Street. The representative, Mr. Howard, reviewed the final paperwork for the $12 million sale, which included long-term royalties tied to future excavation. He looked up with professional admiration. You've made a very strategic decision, Mrs. Matthews. These rights will appreciate for decades. You negotiated well. Caroline smiled politely. I've learned patience pays off. When the contract was signed, she walked out into the crisp Vermont air feeling lighter than she had in years. The leaves were just starting to turn at the edges, flashes of amber and gold among the green. Back at the cabin, she kept the exterior as humble as ever. Unpainted walls, patched roof, wild ivy creeping up the porch posts. It still looked like a forgotten place, which suited her perfectly. From the road, no one would guess there was a woman inside managing millions, reviewing investment portfolios by candlelight and sipping tea beside a letter written in her late husband's hand. Amanda, meanwhile, continued her descent in full view of the town, another wealthy daughter burning through her fortune in search of meaning. Caroline didn't gloat. She simply watched the seasons change, her heart quiet and steady. One evening, as the first autumn rain fell against the cabin roof, Caroline looked out the window and smiled faintly. Robert had been right all along. Justice hadn't come with thunder or punishment. It had come softly, like rainfall, steady, cleansing, inevitable. Rain fell in relentless sheets that night, drumming against the cabin roof like a steady heartbeat. The woods around Pine Creek were swallowed in mist, and thunder rolled low over the Vermont hills. Caroline sat near the fire, a book resting open in her lap, though she hadn't read a word in an hour. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked pine. It was the kind of night that kept everyone indoors, everyone except the desperate. Headlights flared across the dirt road outside, sweeping over the cabin walls. Caroline looked up, startled. No one came out here without calling first. The sound of gravel crunching under tires grew louder until a small, dented gray sedan stopped in front of the porch. Through the curtain of rain, a silhouette stepped out, hesitant, soaked to the bone, shoulders hunched. It took only a moment for recognition to hit her. Amanda. Caroline's breath caught, but her heart remained steady. She rose, opening the door as her daughter ran toward the porch, shielding her face from the storm. Amanda looked older, thinner. The sharp edges of arrogance that once defined her features had dulled into exhaustion. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling. "Please, can I come in?" Caroline stepped aside, wordlessly. Amanda entered, dripping water onto the wooden floor, her designer coat heavy with rain. For a few seconds, they simply stood facing each other, the silence between them heavier than the storm outside. "Sit," Caroline said at last, her tone calm but distant. Amanda sank into the chair near the fire, shivering. Caroline handed her a towel without a word. She noticed the chipped polish on Amanda's nails, the dark circles beneath her eyes, the expensive watch still on her wrist, a remnant of a life that was now slipping through her fingers. Amanda looked around the cabin, her gaze resting on the small lamp the neatly stacked books, the simple order of the space. "It's different than I remembered," she said softly. "You've made it nice." Caroline didn't answer. She poured tea into 2 mismatched mugs, setting one before her daughter. "What are you doing here, Amanda?" Amanda swallowed hard. "I didn't know where else to go." Her voice cracked. I'm in trouble, Mom." Caroline leaned back in her chair, her face unreadable. "What kind of trouble?" Tears welled in Amanda's eyes. "The house is gone. I sold it to cover some of the loans, but it wasn't enough. I owe over $400,000, and the bank won't renew my line of credit. My car's barely running. I have nothing left." Caroline watched her quietly. Amanda's words fell like stones into a still pond, each one sending ripples through the silence. "I thought you had friends," Caroline said evenly. "Business partners. All those people who filled your parties." "They're gone," Amanda whispered. "They stopped answering my calls once the money ran out." She looked up, her eyes pleading. "You're all I have left." Caroline's gaze softened, though her expression didn't change. "Funny," she said slowly. "I seem to remember standing in this very spot, asking for something I thought was mine. You told me then that this house wasn't mine anymore, that I needed to learn to stand on my own 2 feet. Do you remember that?" Amanda's lips trembled. "I was angry. I didn't mean—" "You meant every word," Caroline interrupted gently. "You made sure I had nothing. You left me here to rot." Amanda's breath hitched. "Please, Mom," she whispered, tears spilling freely now. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you. I can't do this alone." Caroline stood, the firelight flickering across her face. She walked slowly toward the window, watching the rain pour down outside. "Do you know what happens to a person when they're stripped of everything?" she said quietly. "They find out who they really are." When she turned back, Amanda had sunk to her knees, clutching her mother's hands. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I was wrong. About everything." Caroline didn't pull away. She let her daughter hold on, let her tears soak the back of her hand. For a long moment, there was only the sound of rain and Amanda's quiet weeping. Then Caroline spoke, her voice calm and steady. "Get up, Amanda." Amanda obeyed, wiping her face, trembling. Caroline met her eyes, her tone neither cruel nor forgiving. "I'll help you," she said finally, "but it will be on my terms, not yours." Outside, the rain began to ease, softening into a mist. The thunder moved farther away, leaving only the crackle of the fire and the faint sound of water dripping from the roof. Inside the small cabin, the balance had shifted, quietly, irreversibly. The mother who once begged for mercy now held the power, and the daughter who had turned her away stood humbled, trembling in the place she had once called worthless. And in that silence, justice began, not loud or vengeful, but steady, inevitable, and completely her own. The fire had burned low when Caroline returned from the kitchen carrying a pot of tea. The storm outside had passed, leaving the air heavy and still. The kind of silence that comes only after something has broken. Amanda sat by the window, hands clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes red but steady now. The pride that once armored her was gone, replaced by a fragile, uneasy humility. Caroline poured tea into 2 cups and took a slow breath. "We should talk about what happens next," she said calmly. Amanda nodded, afraid to meet her mother's eyes. "I'll do anything, Mom. I need a chance to start over." Caroline studied her for a moment. The same face she had once kissed goodnight now looked unfamiliar, drawn older, almost childlike in defeat. There was a time she might have rushed to comfort her, but that instinct had burned away months ago, replaced by something stronger, steadier. "All right," Caroline began. "I'll help you, but this isn't charity. It's a loan. I'll lend you $500,000, enough to clear your debts and give you room to breathe." Amanda blinked in disbelief. 500,000? You'd really... Caroline raised a hand, stopping her. It comes with conditions. You'll repay every cent, plus 5% interest, over 10 years. The contract will be legally binding. Amanda swallowed hard, nodding slowly. I understand. Caroline's voice remained gentle but firm. That's not all. Every Saturday, you'll come here. You'll work, cleaning, fixing the porch, chopping wood if needed. You'll help me rebuild what you once called worthless. Think of it as repayment in another form. Amanda's face flushed. You want me to clean? Yes, Caroline said simply. To remind you that worth isn't tied to money or reputation. It's built from effort, from humility. You took everything from me once. Now, you'll help restore what's left. Amanda opened her mouth to protest, but stopped. The words caught in her throat, replaced by the memory of her own cruelty. She nodded instead, her voice barely a whisper. All right. Caroline studied her daughter for a long, silent moment before speaking again. And there's one more thing. Amanda's stomach nodded. What is it? You'll write a letter, an apology to the family for the lies you told, for the way you treated me, for the shame you caused. You'll send it to everyone who turned their back on me because of your words. And you'll read it aloud at Thanksgiving when we gather again. Amanda stared at her, stunned. Mom, please don't make me. I'm not making you, Caroline said softly. You asked for my help. These are the terms. I want you to understand what real accountability feels like. If you can do that, maybe there's hope for us both. Tears spilled down Amanda's cheeks. She tried to speak, but only managed a shaky nod. I'll do it, she whispered. All of it. Caroline's tone softened for the first time that night. Good. Then we'll start fresh. No more deceit. No more pretending. Just truth and work. Amanda wiped her face with the sleeve of her jacket, her voice breaking. I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. I know, Caroline said quietly. But I need to see it, not just hear it. The fire crackled, filling the silence between them. Outside, the rain had stopped completely, leaving the forest washed clean and glistening under the pale light of dawn. Caroline poured herself another cup of tea, the faintest hint of peace settling in her chest. She had not sought revenge, only balance. When Amanda finally stood to leave, she paused at the door. I'll be here Saturday morning, she said softly. Caroline nodded without looking up. Bring work clothes. The next Saturday, as the first sun touched the wet pines, a modest gray sedan pulled up the dirt road again. Amanda stepped out wearing jeans and an old flannel shirt, her hair tied back, her eyes clear but humbled. For the first time in years, she didn't look like a lawyer or a socialite. She looked like someone ready to begin again. By the time autumn settled over Vermont, the woods around Pine Creek had turned into a painting of amber and rust. The air carried the scent of pine sap and wet leaves, and smoke from Caroline's fireplace drifted lazily through the cool air. Saturdays had become ritual now. Every week, Amanda arrived just after sunrise in her gray sedan. Wearing jeans and work gloves, her hair tied back, her expression quiet but purposeful. The first few visits had been awkward, silent, heavy with everything unsaid. Amanda swept floors, scrubbed the porch, stacked logs by the firewood shed. Caroline gave instructions without warmth, but without cruelty, her voice calm and even. Yet, as the weeks passed, something began to shift. The air between them grew less brittle. The silence softened into something almost comfortable. Sometimes, while Amanda worked, Caroline would bring her tea, and they'd sit together on the porch steps, watching the wind stir the trees. Conversation came in small, hesitant fragments about weather, errands, even a few memories from the past that no longer hurt to mention. One morning, as they painted the cabin shutters a deep forest green, Amanda paused, brushed midair. "Do you ever think about Dad?" she asked quietly. Caroline looked up from her own brushstroke. "Every day," she said. "Not with sadness anymore. Just gratitude." Amanda nodded, her gaze distant. "I used to think he loved you more than me. Maybe I resented that." Caroline didn't respond right away. "He loved us differently," she said at last. "He trusted you to find your way. He trusted me to survive." The words hung between them, simple but heavy. Amanda set down her brush, her eyes glistening. "I didn't understand that until now." As the months slipped by, Amanda kept her promise. She came every Saturday, no matter the weather. She repaired steps, replaced cracked tiles, even built new shelves in the kitchen. When she worked, there was no pretense left, no manicured pride, no superiority. She moved with quiet focus, her hands raw and her mind steady. One late afternoon, as golden light filtered through the trees, Amanda leaned on the porch railing, her face thoughtful. "Mom," she said softly, "can I ask you something?" Caroline looked up from the book she was reading. "Of course." Amanda hesitated, her voice small. "Will you ever forgive me?" Caroline closed her book slowly, studying her daughter. The question wasn't unexpected, but hearing it aloud still made her chest tighten. She stood, walking to the edge of the porch, where the last of the autumn leaves swirled around their feet. "Forgiveness isn't a switch, Amanda," she said quietly. "It doesn't happen because someone asks for it. It happens when I see real change." Amanda nodded, tears forming. "I'm trying, Mom. I really am." Caroline gave a faint smile. "I know you are, and that matters." For a long while, neither of them spoke. The sun slipped lower, washing the trees in soft gold. A flock of geese passed overhead, their cries fading into the horizon. That evening, after Amanda left, Caroline walked through the cabin, running her fingers over the smooth wood of the new shelves, the freshly painted window frames. Each corner of the house carried Amanda's effort, humility made visible. For the first time since Robert's death, the place didn't feel like exile anymore. It felt like home. Weeks later, Caroline noticed that Amanda no longer came out of obligation, but out of peace. She arrived early, sometimes bringing breakfast. They laughed now, quietly, carefully, but genuinely. And though Caroline never said it aloud, something inside her had begun to soften. Forgiveness, she realized, didn't come with grand gestures or apologies. It came in small, steady acts, the kind that rebuilt what pride once destroyed. When the first frost appeared on the fields, Caroline stepped out onto the porch and breathed in the cold air. Inside, the cabin glowed warm and full of life again. She smiled to herself, the faint ache in her chest replaced by calm. Amanda had finally changed, and in that change, Caroline found her own peace. A year had passed since the night Amanda came to the cabin in tears. Vermont had shed its winter silence, and the hills were once again alive with the green breath of spring. Daffodils dotted the slopes, and the rivers, swollen with melted snow, shimmered beneath the morning sun. At the edge of one of those hills stood a new house, modern but warm, with wide glass windows that opened to a view of the valley below. The home wasn't grand in the way Amanda used to value things, but it had a quiet elegance, a sense of peace woven into every beam and wall. Caroline had designed it herself with the help of a local builder, using part of the fortune she'd once found buried under the cabin. That morning, she stood by the porch railing, her cup of tea steaming in the crisp air. A faint smile touched her lips as she heard the sound of an approaching car. Down the gravel drive came a familiar gray sedan. Cleaned, repaired, steady again. Amanda stepped out, carrying a basket of freshly baked bread and tulips. She looked different now, simpler, softer. Her hair was loose, her clothes plain, her expression calm in a way that had taken months to return. Caroline met her at the door. "You found it," she said, smiling. Amanda looked up at the house, her eyes wide with quiet awe. "Mom, this is beautiful. You built this." "With a little help," Caroline said. "Come in." Inside, the house smelled faintly of cedar and lemon oil. Light poured through the windows. Falling across a piano in the corner, a vase of wildflowers, shelves lined with books. Amanda walked slowly through the rooms, her fingers grazing the smooth wood of the banister. "I don't understand," she murmured. "When I left, you were living in that cabin. How?" Caroline motioned toward the dining table, where 2 cups of tea waited. "Sit. I'll tell you." When Amanda settled, Caroline reached into a drawer and pulled out an old envelope, the one Robert had written, now worn soft at the edges. She placed it on the table. "Your father left you what he thought you wanted," she began gently. "The house, the money, the appearance of success. But he left me something else, something harder to find." Amanda frowned, confused. "The cabin?" Caroline nodded. "Under it, he left deeds, geological reports, mineral rights, an entire network of land that he put in my name. I didn't understand it at first. But Robert knew me. He knew I'd look deeper. He trusted me to wait." She paused, watching Amanda's expression shift from disbelief to realization. "The land was worth more than everything he left you combined. I sold the rights last year for $12 million, and I still receive royalties." Amanda's eyes widened, her mouth parting in stunned silence. "$12 million!" She leaned back, breathless. "All this time you had it, and you never said a word." Caroline smiled faintly. "Because I needed to learn who you were before I told you who I had become. If I'd told you then, it wouldn't have changed you. But now," she reached across the table, covering Amanda's trembling hands, "now you understand what wealth really means." Tears welled in Amanda's eyes, spilling over as she whispered, "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "You've already earned it," Caroline said softly. "Not with words, but with work. Your father believed in redemption, Amanda. So do I." For a long while neither spoke. The only sound was the distant call of a woodpecker echoing through the trees. When Amanda finally lifted her gaze, there was peace in it. "I repaid the last of my debt last month," she said quietly. "And I reopened my law practice, but this time it's different. I started a foundation to help families who can't afford legal aid. It's not much yet, but it feels right." Caroline's smile deepened, pride glinting behind her calm eyes. "That's the best kind of wealth, Amanda. The kind that grows from what's been learned, not what's been lost." They sat together for hours, sharing stories, laughter, even silence, the kind that no longer hurt. The distance that once defined them had vanished, replaced by understanding that felt steady and real. As the afternoon sun painted the valley gold, Caroline rose and stepped out onto the porch. Amanda followed, leaning on the railing beside her. Below them, the hills rolled endlessly, alive with spring. Caroline's voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but the words carried through the soft air. Robert was right. True wealth isn't what you inherit. It's what you build from the ashes, and who you become when silence turns into strength. Amanda turned toward her mother, eyes shining, and for the first time in years, Caroline saw not the proud, reckless daughter she once was, but the woman Robert had always hoped she'd become. And as the wind swept gently across the Vermont hills, mother and daughter stood together in the light, no longer bound by resentment, but by everything they had rebuilt from the ruins.